Hello everyone, my name is Will from Ghosthack, and today I am here to give you an overview of one of the demo tracks for the Ultimate Vocal Library Volume 3. Now this demo track that I'm showing you right here features, of course, vocals from the Ultimate Vocal Library Volume 3. The vocalist on this track is named Meki, and the song is called Home Tonight. It's at 100 BPM in A flat minor, so before I take you through this project, let me just play you the track that we have.
You know you drive me mad. You know that I can't get enough of you and I. You know that I'm a fool. You know I've been chasing you. You know I wanna be more than friends. Baby, promise you won't say maybe. If I ask you to come home, home tonight, home tonight. Baby, promise you won't say maybe. I ask you to come home, home tonight, home tonight, home, home tonight, home tonight, home tonight. I ask you to come home tonight.
So there's the track I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how I put all these vocals in the track, how I kind of built around the vocals, and I'm going to kind of break down all the elements of this track so you can see my thought process in creating this. So headphones go on, and the first thing I'm going to start with is probably the vocals, just because that's kind of the focal point of the track, and if I take you through how I did the vocals, all the other parts will just kind of fall into place after that. So this particular vocal that I worked with came with 4 different files. We had the main lead, we had kind of ad-libs that were sort of in the middle, and then we had harmonies that were on either side. There's like 2 versions, so you could pan one left and one right. And this is especially useful when you get into this drop area where I kind of layered them together in different ways.
I ask you to come home tonight.
So this is how I went about post-processing the main vocal. To start out, I just have an Edison, which is just recording a little chop there, which we'll get to later. But that's not actually affecting the sound. The first thing affecting the sound is just an EQ to roll off the low end. After that, a little bit of Soundgoodizer. I like to just put a touch of this on some vocals if you want them to really stand out and be nice and strong, especially in an electronic track. This might not work very good in, say, like an acoustic track, but adding a little bit of Soundgoodizer to an electronic track will make the vocals fit in with the electronic elements a little bit more. Also, a little bit of soft clipping. Man, this is just the slightest bit of saturation. It's barely even noticeable, but it just adds a little bit of strength behind the vocal, and kind of like the Soundgoodizer, it also helps it fit in with other electronic elements. And after that, we have SerumFX, and basically all this SerumFX is being used for is both delay and reverb just in one plugin. I get very used to using the Serum delay and the Serum reverb, but you can use any delay and any reverb, really. It's all just basic stuff. Just a nice normal delay and some nice echoey verb. And then here's the post-processing chain that I used for the main just mono ad-libs. You can hear it sounds kind of watery and washed out and spread out. I think it's really cool to add that kind of effect on harmonies, especially when it's paired with, you know, a nice solid main vocal. We have first off an EQ, which I'm rolling off the low end, kind of like I did with the main vocal, but I'm also taking out these areas around 1K and around 2K and 3K that were just very strong. And I took that out because the main vocal that we're trying to highlight in this track was very heavy in those areas, and most vocals are. The human voice is very heavy around 1K, 2K, and 3K. So if you take that out, a little bit of the harmony, it kind of brings forth the main vocal and kind of sets the harmony more in the background, even if the harmony is still pretty loud. So I like to do that to harmonies. Next up, a little bit of Soundgoodizer, just like the main vocal, and for exactly the same reasons. After that, we have SerumFX, which is still doing some reverb like it was doing before, but there's actually no delay on this. I didn't want the delay on the harmony to kind of be trailing out too much. But basically what I wanted was to add a little bit of soft clipping. I turned the mix to about 50%. This just adds a little bit of saturation, a little bit of grit, makes it more electronic sounding. And then I have a chorus here and a hyperdimension, which is just really washing it out. You can see I have this unison up all the way to 7 in the hyper, and I brought the mix up nice and high, and a nice tight chorus going on here with low rates, low delays. The depth's pretty high. So that just makes it sound kind of wishy-washy and watery, which works pretty well for this harmony. And then lastly, just an EQ, just to lower any weird low frequencies that we could get from those effects, and to take down a little bit around, I guess, 8.6K. I guess I just found some harmonics in there that weren't that good.
Home tonight, home tonight.
Then after that, we have these left and right vocals.
Home tonight, home tonight.
And what I did was I just went into these and I panned them one hard left and then one hard right. And then I just routed them into the same track where I could do just basic post-processing like we've been doing, rolled off the low end. I also ducked off a little bit of the high end here, but took down a little bit around 1K, between 800 and 1K, and then around 3K.
Home tonight.
Because it was just nice and strong in this area right here, and I wanted to kind of knock that down to make way for the main vocal. And then of course we have a little bit of Soundgoodizer, a little less than before, and then the SerumFX, which has both the chorus and the reverb, so it gets a little bit of that sort of watery sound, but also keeps some of this reverberation.
Home tonight.
And all of these layer together pretty well.
So come home tonight, home tonight.
And one other thing that I want to mention real quick is this little part right here.
I ask you to come home tonight.
Basically what I did was I took the SerumFX, which has both the reverb and the delay on the main vocal channel right here, and I brought that down so there's no reverb and delay. And in this part right here, I just brought it up.
Home tonight.
So it goes completely dry right here.
I ask you to come home.
And then it goes into the reverberated area.
Home tonight.
And all I did for this bit right here was I just took this little section of the main vocal and I turned it on stretch and I just pitched it all the way down 12 semitones, so it's just an octave lower. And then I brought down the volume a little bit. Keep in mind this is obviously unique from the other ones. I had to make it unique first. But I just routed it into 20, which is the main channel for the main vocal, so it could be affected by this reverb automation as well. I did that here and I also used it here.
Come home tonight.
And that just adds a really interesting kind of layered effect to that one bit right before it goes into the drop. And then of course, as you hear, I took these harmonies and kind of chopped them up and used them in different spots in this drop.
Come home tonight.
And that's really the nicest thing about having all these harmonies here and ad-libs separated out, is because you can use them to fill in these areas that you might not necessarily not want a main vocal. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want the main vocal in this drop area. I wanted the vocal chop that I will get to in a minute to be kind of highlighted, but I wanted these other vocals to come in just to back up the sound and to make it sound more rich and thick. So that's 100% my favorite part of having all these harmonies separated out. After that, we have this piano. And what I did for this one is I just looped a part of the vocal that I thought was kind of like the main section.
Baby, promise you won't marry me if I ask you to come home tonight, home tonight.
And it all started out from just a really basic pattern. I just found one note that kind of worked with each one.
Baby, promise you won't marry me if
and I just added notes on top of that. Now this chord progression is actually fairly simple. It's not complex. It's kind of a normal one because you just have a triad. That's the root, the minor third, and the fifth. And then it goes down to this one. and it's just stepping down. You can see how this is all just sort of stepping down on the piano, but it was also layered with this bass line where basically I just took the notes here and kind of had them crawl up instead of going down. Like you can see there's the G sharp, and there's the A sharp right here, then there's the B right there. And I'm going to be very honest, I don't know much about music theory, but the best way to do this was to, have my MIDI keyboard in front of me and this right here, and kind of click around and just find basic note patterns that worked with the vocals and just create chords out of them.
Home tonight, baby. Promise you won't to maybe. When I ask you to come home tonight, home tonight.
And this progression ended up working throughout all the rest of the track as well. So there's nothing too complicated about that. That's just a basic piano. The next thing I have here is this little bell, which is actually a preset from Flex that I use a lot. This one's called Music Box. And it makes really nice arps like this. And this whole thing is kind of derived from the chords that I created before. I just found a few of the notes in there and figured out what notes work and just created a really basic arp to go in the background. And also what's really important is that this arp right here is introducing kind of the 6-beat rhythm that we have instead of just the 4/4. Because if you hear in this beginning part where we have some of these drums come in that I'm going to go over in a sec, that's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. It kind of goes like that. But then we get to the drop and the pattern is very different. Instead of going 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, it goes 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And this change in rhythm actually kind of starts from this bell. It's the first thing to kind of introduce that. So it's very important to use in this beginning section, and I kind of automated it in with this bandpass. It just sort of fades in a little bit. And I know I just went over the piano, but I do want to go over, there is a little bit of a piano melody here. And the purpose of this piano melody solely is to just hint at the melody that's going to come into the drop that I'm going to use with this vocal chop, which I'll go over how I made that in a sec. But that's purely the purpose of this piano melody, is just to hint at that and make it not just come out of nowhere. And then the next thing I want to go over is these strings. And these strings are one of my favorite parts of this track, actually. And these strings, like this chord pattern, actually came from the piano. You can hear they match up very well. And what I did was I essentially took those piano chords and I added some variation. Like you can see in these second bits, I added some more notes here. I added some more notes right here that are just a little bit different, and some variation here. Just some kind of transitional notes to make the strings different than just the basic 4 chords that are playing in this piano. And they add just a ton of emotion into the drop and into these transitions right here. But before we get into the drop, I kind of want to quickly go over these drums that we have in the beginning. They sound something like this. And essentially, with all the ambient stuff going on, it's basically just these drums. We have a kick, then we have these claps with a lot of reverb, which these claps are actually used in the drop itself. As a matter of fact, all of these drums are. The difference is that this kick I just made a little bit smaller so it isn't too overpowering. But I layered it with these cinematic drums right here. Most of those drums are from Ghosthack's pack Quantum Force Volume 2, the cinematic drums pack. But in layering those, it creates a much more atmospheric drum pattern that we can listen to.
You know I like you, bird. You know you drive me mad. You know that I can't get enough of you and me.
For a really slow drum loop like this at 100 BPM, it definitely needed something more cinematic and ambient to keep it interesting. And aside from all the individual sound effects, such as impact, this glitterfall, this subdrop, this noise, and some risers. The only other thing we really have in this drop that we can go over is this bass line, which is slowly just fading down. It's kind of got high pass and it's really weak right now, but it kind of gets faded down to be stronger. And of course, this is the bass line from the drop right here. A lot of this drop had kind of synthwave inspiration, but it's not really synthwave. It's like a weird mix of pop and synthwave. But essentially in the drop, we have the piano, we have the bell arp, we have the strings that are getting sidechained with this automation right here. We have the bass line, which I'm going to have to enable the automation for. And then we have this right here. Which, remember that vocal chop I showed you in the main track for these vocals? This one right here. That is the sample that I grabbed from the original acapella. That's just a little snippet of the acapella that I found where one note was held. And I dragged it right into this channel rack where we have this right here. And I used it to create this melody. And this is how I affected it. I first added a little bit of crush, where this is a free bit crushing plugin, where it's actually pretty good. It's pretty high quality. There are bit crushing plugins in almost every DAW out there, but this is one that I like to use a lot. It just adds a little more high-end sizzle. I actually added this plugin Halftime, which I think is like $12, but basically what it does is it just adds a slow version. Like if I were to turn this mix all the way up, this kind of effect is actually used a lot in hip hop, but it worked out pretty good here where I could add kind of a lower vocal layer by just mixing in this halftime plugin. Next up, we have the EQ, cutting the low end, cutting a bit of between 2 and 3K, ducking the high end down, a little bit of Soundgoodizer here, tad bit of soft clipper just like before, and then some SerumFX for chorus, delay, reverb, and this right here, which I'm actually using as kind of a side chain. What it's doing is basically saying this is a low pass filter that I brought this cutoff all the way down, so it essentially does nothing. When the mix is all the way up, it's completely silent. And what this kind of modulation is saying is that just for a moment at the beginning of each beat, the mix is going to be all the way up. You see it's going from up all the way down with this modulation. So it goes from mix all the way up to mix all the way down right here. And you can see this repeating, and you can make it repeat by turning on note latch. But basically this is off and it's constantly repeating, and it's playing right at the tempo of the kick drum. So it'll just be silent just at a little moment when the kick hits. So that acts just as kind of a ducking sidechain. You can also do the same thing with gross beat very easily, although I don't own gross beat, so I prefer to use Serum to do this. But it's sidechaining basically the same way that I would sidechain anything else. And that's how I took a little bit of this vocal to use as the main element in the drop. Next up under that, we have this. Which is kind of like a synth string sound. I took the chords from the strings and I made this little Serum patch, which is basically a detuned saw with a little bit of attack, a little bit of release. And I have a heavy chorus and heavy hyper dimension on it. You can see this is 7 all the way up. The detune's nice and high. It's just really spread out and really warbly. I have a little bit of a low pass on here, just lowering down those harsh high ends, and then a filter on there to cut the low end, dip a little down in the mid, just to kind of make it a little bit weak. It's not super strong, and a little bit of flanging in there. And basically this is just acting as a layer to make the harmonic content in this track stronger. Then after that, we have these drums, a little high cymbal there. We have the kick, We have the claps that we already went over. That layer like that. We have a cymbal. We have a Glitterfall down, which I've already shown. And we have this little gurgly kind of wet downlifter. And we also use this as a riser. I just thought it added a little more texture to the track. And of course at the outro here, everything kind of fades out and I kind of take out the electronic elements to just leave the strings and the piano and the vocals to make it sound more atmospheric and calm. And I bring in a lot more reverb with this automation right here. It's just bringing up a lot of reverb in this one area. And also these sound effects together sound very nice just by themselves right here. Like we have the Glitterfall, we have a cymbal, we have a subdrop and an impact. This combination of sound effects is actually one of my favorites to have: an impact, a subdrop, a glitterfall, and a cymbal, because the glitterfall and the subdrop are both very high frequency and very low frequency at the same time, and they complement each other really well. And then of course the cymbal and the impact, just as a big epic hit at the beginning, and it all works together very nicely. So there we go. That is how I created this demo track for the Ultimate Vocal Library Volume 3. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope you enjoy the Ultimate Vocal Library Volume 3. We worked very hard on it, and I can tell you this is one of the best vocal libraries that Ghosthack has ever released. So we really appreciate all of your support, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.